host, Rocco Rossi.
Hello everyone and welcome to the 2022 Ontario Business Achievement Awards, brought to you by our generous series presenting partner, Canadian National Railway. This is an extra special year because we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of the OBAAs. Glad to be doing that with our partners at TLN. As the indispensable partner of business, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce is in constant conversation with leaders. You know that the theme for this series of awards is the inclusive economy. Within that inclusive nature, we also are striving for sustainability. Climate change comes up in virtually every conversation. It's far bigger than business, but business absolutely has to be at the table. So we're so delighted that our episode partner, Bruce Power, is helping us bring this conversation to you today. Did you know that this next year's global green sustainable economy is said to be worth $2.5 trillion? That's with a T, not a B. So it's both challenge and opportunity for Ontario's economy. Knowing the context of that conversation is so crucial, and we've got an incredible subject matter expert with us today, none other than my colleague Claudia DeSanti, who heads up our climate work. Take it away, Claudia.
Thanks, Rocco. Now, you mentioned the inclusive economy. Well, climate change is absolutely part of that conversation because it affects us all differently. As a business community, we are not only impacted by climate change, but we have a responsibility to be leaders in confronting it. As you will see in this next piece, many businesses in Ontario are already leading the way, and there is a lot of opportunity to build on that progress.
So delighted to be having this conversation, and big shout out to our episode partner, Bruce Power, and our series presenting partner, Canadian National Railway, for making this possible.
In 2021, CN continued to play a vital role in the North American economy, powering sustainable growth for our customers, our people, and our communities. CN's resilient railroaders safely navigated a challenging year to keep the North American supply chain moving. In Western Canada, we invested in infrastructure and equipment to grow our capacity and increase our share of new industrial production, while also responding to shifting demands in commodities. In Eastern Canada, we're developing terminal capacity to provide our customers with cost-advantageous intermodal routes. In the U.S., we intend to boost our competitive presence and capabilities in the Gulf region with daily trains from key markets like Chicago, Detroit, and Memphis. Safety is a core value at CN, and we have an uncompromising commitment to the health and safety of our employees, the customers we serve, and our neighboring communities. CN continues to demonstrate leadership with respect to environmental, social, and governance initiatives. 2021 saw CN continuing to contribute to the communities where we live and work. CN enables North American and global trade, and our tri-coastal network connects customers to the world. To all our dedicated railroaders, our customers, and supply chain partners, the communities in which we operate, our stakeholders and shareholders, thank you.
Gentlemen, you both lead sustainability efforts with your respective organizations. Michael Kelly at OMERS, Todd Ernst from GTAA, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure to be here.
Michael, let's start with you. Was there an aha moment in your organization that led you to making more climate sustainable decisions?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call it an aha moment. The issues around climate change have been with us for many decades. But what I would say is there's really been an intensified focus on the issue over the last 5 years or so. And so, whereas previously the issues might have been really focused on by a sustainable investing or responsible investing team, now they're front and center with both the C-suite and the board of directors.
Todd, how about your organization? Did you have this aha moment?
Yeah, I would agree. There wasn't necessarily a single aha. Once the organization made the commitment to address climate change, there have been multiple ahas since then, and I expect more to come.
So how do you keep everyone in your organization engaged in climate-related issues?
A few different ways. We use some of the more traditional communication methods, such as the online employee portal and meetings to convey and educate folks on climate change. But the media has actually done a lot of the work for us too, with the elevation of climate change as an issue broadly. So really, our focus now and going forward is much more on involving the employees in being part of the solution with us.
And Michael, how do you keep folks engaged in your organization?
Well, we have a lot of dialogue with our investing teams about what OMER's approach is in the area of climate change. But frankly, it's not that hard to keep our investing teams engaged. This is one of the biggest issues, global issues of our time, and it really does have meaningful effects on the value of our portfolio companies and the investments that OMERS makes.
What advice would you give to smaller companies that don't have sustainability officers to go greener?
Well, I think one thing is to understand your energy profile and your energy supply. Another thing might be to focus on your procurement and your supply chain and trying to understand what your suppliers are doing in this areas or in other areas around ESG as well.
Todd, from your perspective, what advice would you give to those smaller companies?
I would suggest reaching out to folks who are a little further ahead on the curve. Contact other people in industry who are already have more advanced climate change programs. Also leverage industry associations like your local Chamber of Commerce or industry associations.
What would you see, Todd, as maybe some technology advancements that are going to happen in the next few years that will affect the sustainability work that you're doing?
I think sustainable aviation fuels and advances in clean flight is going to be a big one for our industry. And then more broadly, with the airport being a small city, a lot of facility-related advances such as geothermal and water source heat pumps and clean energy sources, energy storage will come into the forefront very much.
Michael, how about you?
Well, I think the one thing we can be sure about is that there will be major technological advancements over the next 20 years. There's so many smart minds working on this. 20 years ago, we didn't even have smartphones. So some of the areas, we try to stay on top of energy storage, electrification, hydrogen. Those are some examples of where I think you'll see, major technological advancements.
How do you see your organization contributing to a greener Ontario within the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, again, our role is in allocating our capital to the right places, to the most efficient spaces. So we want to be on top of where the world is heading on climate, as an example. So we have a major investment in Bruce Power, which is an emissions-free major source of energy for the province of Ontario, and it's one of the contributing factors that allowed Ontario to get out of coal-powered energy production. So that's an example of where we try and use our capital forward-thinking about energy transition.
And Todd, how do you see your organization making a different type of contribution over the next 3 to 5 years?
So just last year, we updated our environmental policy to include a net zero no later than 2050 target. The last year or so has been focused on the planning and the reinvigoration of our GHG program. The next 3 to 5 years, we're going to start to see the first steps of executing against that program. And that's going to include some key levers, including increased clean energy, energy conservation, and also energy management.
Thank you, Michael and Todd, for speaking with me today.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is the Director General of the World Trade Organization and the first woman to hold that role. She was recently quoted as saying, "The bottom line is that growth and sustainability and inclusivity need not be antagonistic to each other." I completely agree with the Director General. We can have growth that is clean and inclusive. Our next guest is a leader that has demonstrated her commitment to living by that quote. Take a look.
It is my great pleasure to introduce Chief Emeritus Emily Wheaton. Emily is a proud Anishinaabe from Curve Lake First Nation, where she grew up and has spent most of her life, having left Curve Lake only to pursue a higher education at Trent University and Osgoode Hall Law School. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us, Chief Emeritus Wheaton.
Thanks so much for having me, Claudia. I'm really excited.
Now, to start off, can you share some memories you have of your family or other leaders in your community respecting the land as you were growing up in Curve Lake?
Absolutely. I think one of my favorite memories is as a child harvesting maple sap to make maple syrup with my dad and my grandfather and my uncles. And when we would do that, to start off the process, we would go to the trees with sama or tobacco and ask the tree to share the sap with us so that we were collecting it in a good way and really making sure that we were harvesting in a way that was in harmony with the environment. So in terms of early memories, I think maple syrup season is one of my favorites, and I'm working on passing that down to my children now too.
And in your time as chief at Curve Lake, in what ways did you experience and observe environmental challenges?
We had a number of environmental challenges, but I think the two that stand out to me the most are the challenge that we had accessing clean drinking water for our community members. And what really drove that home was that I would sit by the water with my grandfather, and he passed away last year. He would have been 100 this year. So he had these incredible stories and this incredible history to share with us. And he would talk about when the water was clear enough and clean enough that he could just go down to the lake and drink straight out of the lake. And so one of our biggest climate issues was the fact that we didn't have clean drinking water in our community. We're a peninsula, so there's these beautiful lakes on three sides of our community, but we couldn't drink the water that was in the ground there coming out of our wells. And that was a really, really significant issue. And it tied into the issue of water levels in our community. The Trent Severn Waterway is a controlled waterway, but in recent years we've seen much greater fluctuations where the water has to be taken way down in the winter. So you've got these ice pieces, ice chunks sitting on top of habitats for animals. And then when the spring freshet would come in, we would get these almost flood levels in our communities. And that was becoming more and more apparent. And we were seeing the impact on species like frogs and fish and beavers and those animals that really rely on the waterways. So I think that's probably the biggest climate issues that we were facing.
It is alarming to hear you speak about the real impacts of climate change in your community. And I want to make sure that we talk about the other side of this. Can you tell us, in your opinion, what would you say the opportunities are around addressing climate change and how that intersects with an inclusive economy?
I think for me, when I was chief of our community, what I saw was this new opportunity coming out of the Indigenous rights that have been recognized in the Canadian legal system, where we could leverage that duty to consult when there's a new project happening that requires our input to change the conversation. And one of the things that we would do is create an economic model that would allow a company or a project to see the impact of the development on our community. So, for example, if somebody wanted to build a parking lot and they had the option of just a gravel parking lot, and that's probably the most cost efficient option, or an above ground parking lot, or an underground parking lot, we could take the actual impact on our community and make an economic or a financial model that said the more land that you take up, the bigger the impact on our community. And what we're looking to do is minimize impact, minimize footprint, so that we have the ability to continue to practice our culture, which is, whether that's harvesting plant species or ensuring that there's an environment for animals to live in that we can harvest, or just because the bottom line is for the environment, it makes more sense to minimize footprint and create an economic model that shows the cost of the loss per square foot of land, and take that to whoever's doing the project to make them aware of the impacts in our community, which then allows them to justify, maybe an above ground parking lot looks like a greater expense, but at the end of the day, the cost really, because there's no compensation to community for loss of land or less compensation, it makes sense to go in that direction.
That makes a lot of sense. And finally, can you share with our audience a little bit about your current work in tackling the environmental challenges of our time?
Absolutely. While I was chief, I became very passionate about the impacts of climate change and what's going on in our environment. I started working with the nuclear industry and learned a huge amount about climate change and energy sources and the impact of energy sources. And I had this belief that renewables like wind and solar were going to be able to provide a sufficient energy source for us to combat climate change. And what I really quickly learned was that the renewables need the support of a stable energy source like nuclear energy. So I became really fascinated and interested in nuclear energy, and I've hit this point where I want to help nuclear energy move forward in order to reduce the impact on climate that other energy sources are having right now, and to be able to find those paths forward. So I'm working with the nuclear energy industry to build relationships with First Nations and bring these two groups that have very similar views on the environment together in stronger and better ways, because there's a big desire to do that, and I'd really love to be a part of it. So that's where I'm headed next.
Absolutely. That combination of nuclear providing baseload power with other resources like wind and solar, that balance is really critical to supporting a clean electricity grid. Emily, thanks so much for sharing your time and your knowledge with us. Wishing you all the best.
Thank you, Claudia. You too. Take care.
We want a healthy planet.
But climate change is real.
And our need for energy keeps growing.
Clean air, clean water, that's what our children deserve.
And nuclear energy can make it happen. Bruce Power began with the biggest greenhouse gas reduction in North America by helping Ontario phase out coal.
That's like taking 7 million cars off the road each year.
By extending the life of the plant and with new nuclear innovation, we're just getting started.
We're just getting started.
We're just getting started. Nuclear power, the key to a better tomorrow.
I think that message sums it up very well. And again, I want to thank our friends at Bruce Power for helping make this episode happen. There is an ancient Haudenosaunee saying that goes, in every deliberation, we should be thinking about the consequences for the next 7 generations. And that's something that business needs to take to heart and think about the long-term consequences of decisions being made today so that it makes sense and comes out right for the next generation and the generations after that. Big thanks to our series presenting partner, Canadian National Railway, without whom this would not be possible. And an even bigger thanks to all of you, the viewers, for joining in. Please follow us. The Ontario Chamber of Commerce is on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn. We'd love to keep this conversation going with you. Until next time, think inclusive.